Imagine waking up on the moon. No trees, no oceans, no air. Just endless gray dust and a sky that's always black. Is this your future? Could we really live on the moon? Or is that just another science fiction dream? In the past, living on the moon was something only seen in movies or books. But with advances in technology, the idea of building a permanent base on the moon is becoming more realistic. It's not just a fantasy anymore. In fact, countries and private companies are racing to make it happen. But what would it actually take to live there? And could we survive in one of the most inhospitable places in the solar system? In this video, we'll break down the challenges, opportunities, and the surprising truths about what life on the moon could look like. Before we start thinking about colonizing the moon, we need to understand one simple thing. The moon is not like Earth. It's cold, barren, and lacks the atmosphere needed for life. There's no oxygen to breathe, no water to drink, and no food to grow. Oh, and did I mention the extreme temperatures? You'd experience some of the hottest days you've ever felt, and the coldest nights that could freeze you solid. The question isn't just how we could live there, but why we think it's even possible. Can we really make a life on this desolate rock? To answer that question, let's break it down. We've all heard about space exploration, but the logistics of surviving on the moon are mind-blowing. First, let's talk about getting there. Right now, sending humans to the moon requires a lot of fuel, which costs a ton of money. This is why the idea of a moon base seems so far out. It's not just a matter of setting up a few tents and calling it home. For any kind of moon colony to be sustainable, we need to solve several huge problems. 1. Life support systems. The moon has no breathable atmosphere. That means we'd need to bring all our air with us. Or better yet, make it there. That's right, turning lunar soil into oxygen is a concept that scientists are exploring right now. It sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, but it's a real possibility. In fact, the European Space Agency is looking into ways we could extract oxygen from the moon's surface by heating it up to extreme temperatures. But even with that tech in place, we'd still need large systems to recycle air and water to make life sustainable. And even then, there's a huge risk. If these systems fail, it could mean death for anyone on the base. 2. The harsh environment. Let's talk about the temperature extremes. In the moon's daytime, temperatures can reach up to 260 degrees, 127 degrees, and at night, they can plummet to 280 degrees, 170, 3 degrees. Imagine having to survive in that kind of environment. Without proper insulation and temperature control, human life wouldn't last long. A lot of the technology we'd need to make it work already exists, but it's going to take a lot of trial and error to make it all work on the moon's surface. One solution could be building habitats underground, where the moon's surface provides some natural insulation. We might even use 3D printers to create buildings out of lunar soil, a process that NASA is testing with the goal of making construction on the moon more affordable. 3. Radiation protection. Space radiation is another major threat. Without the protection of Earth's magnetic field, the moon is exposed to harmful radiation from the sun and cosmic rays. Even with modern radiation protection, spending long periods of time exposed to these elements could lead to serious health problems, including cancer. To solve this, we'd need advanced shielding, perhaps even using the moon's regolith, the surface material, to create walls thick enough to protect astronauts from these deadly rays. But what happens if a solar storm strikes? How would we protect our people in an emergency? 4. Food and water. A sustainable food and water source is perhaps the hardest problem. Water can be found on the moon in the form of ice at the poles, but it's not easy to get to. Harvesting that ice and turning it into drinkable water could be a massive challenge. And when it comes to food, you can't just pop down to the local store on the moon. We'd need to grow our own food. And right now, We don't have a lot of experience growing crops in lunar soil. Scientists are looking at ways to grow plants in controlled environments, like greenhouses. But the lack of nutrients in the soil and the harsh conditions might make that difficult. However, recent experiments have shown that plants can grow in moon, like soil, which is a promising start. It might take years of research and trials to figure out the best way to cultivate crops, but it's a possibility that gets more realistic every year. 5. The cost. Now let's talk about the money side of things. Sending humans to the moon is expensive. NASA's Apollo missions cost about $25 billion in 1960s dollars, which would be equivalent to around $150 billion today. And that was just for a few short trips. Building a permanent colony would require a budget that makes those Apollo missions look like pocket change. But here's where things are starting to change. Companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, and even private investors are getting involved in the moon race. Elon Musk has already set his sights on the moon as a stepping stone for space exploration, and his company, SpaceX, has developed reusable rockets that could drastically cut costs. NASA is also working on the Artemis program, which plans to send astronauts back to the moon in the coming years with the goal of establishing a permanent presence. As the technology improves and costs come down, the dream of a moon colony gets closer to becoming a reality. Here's the thing, all of these challenges are huge, but they're not insurmountable. Technology has advanced more in the past few decades than we could have imagined just a generation ago. Think about it. The first moon landing happened in 1969, and now, less than 60 years later, we're talking about building permanent bases on the moon. It's no longer just a dream. It's happening right now. The real question is, are we ready for it? Could we live on the moon? Technically, yes. But it's not going to be easy. It's going to take innovation, perseverance, and a lot of risk. But the moon is our next frontier, and the possibilities are endless. Living on the moon isn't a matter of if, but when. We've already started laying the groundwork. The moon might not be as hospitable as Earth, but with the right technology and determination, we can make it work. The future of space exploration is just beginning, and one of the biggest challenges lies in establishing a permanent human presence on the moon. It's not just about survival, it's about thriving. If you want to learn more about the future of space exploration, hit that subscribe